site. Put the joining link that you joined with, and we will get started. We are at 6:31. And Ashley, if you can confirm for me verbally if all of our candidates are in the room.
Good evening, everyone. At the moment, I'm echoing first Tanya's expression of gratitude for your patience. I just wanted to note that I do not see former Delegate Winsome Sears. If you are here, would you mind raising your hand?
If you are on the screen and you are not running for a statewide office, please remove yourself. I will do so now. All right, we're going to just begin. Hello, welcome everyone, and I do apologize. Thank you for being here. We are very excited to have you all join us for this virtual statewide candidate forum taking place as part of the ARC of Virginia's 2021 statewide convention. I'm Tanya Milling, Executive Director at the ARC of Virginia, and I'll be serving as the moderator this evening. We're thrilled that so many of the candidates running for statewide office were able to join us, and they will be introducing themselves at various points throughout the evening. Mark Herring, one of the candidates for Attorney General, has let us know that he's had a direct conflict arise and unfortunately will not be able to join us after all. And former Governor Terry Mcauliffe, one of the gubernatorial candidates, is able to join us, though he will need to leave after the first question to keep a prior commitment. Running for campaign is very busy, so we appreciate everyone's time. We understand that. We have with us and appreciate having Princess Blanding, Terry Mcauliffe, and Glenn Yonkin as candidates for governor. Welcome to Delegate Hala Ayala and former Delegate Winsome Sears, candidates for lieutenant governor, and Delegate Jason Mayorkas, candidate for Attorney General, is with us tonight. Welcome, and thank you all for coming to talk about these critical issues. In the event of technical issues on top of the ones we've had, any difficulties, we will invite the candidates to send videos that we would share if something happens and they already get kicked off for technical reasons. We are by necessity working with a very tight timeline, so I'm going to turn it over to Sharon and Connor Cummings so they can deliver the family message and offer some additional opening words.
Okay, thank you. These forums are designed for you from the comfort of your home. We want to thank the ARC of Virginia, the ARC of Northern Virginia, the Autism Society of Northern Virginia, Web Up Virginia, the Autism Society of Central Virginia, the Autism Society of Tidewater, and special thanks to the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities Training Alumni Association for supplying the interpreters and the captioner. Also, thank you to each and every one of you watching live now or watching it taped at a later date. Now, I am proud to introduce my son, Connor, who will say a few words on the logistics, and then you will hear from Tanya Milling again, who is our moderator for the 90 minutes.
My name is Connor Cummings. I am a self-advocate and proud to be autistic. Please remember this is a sensory-friendly forum. This is not a debate. Talk about what you can and have done for individuals and families with disabilities. Share your disability experience and plans if elected. Please concentrate only on you. Let the others candidates concentrate on themselves while you talk all about you. No speaking at the same time or interrupting each other. No raised voices, please. Thank you for respecting the sensory-friendly instructions. This is your opportunity to answer our questions and to hear our stories, not just today, but every day you are in office. To all of you watching, these candidates are here because they care. Thank you for being here to respectfully listen to all candidates. This is our opportunity to hear a disability platform to help ensure that our representatives include us in their decision-making, not just mentioned, but a seat at the table. November 2nd or prior, you can vote for the candidates you feel is best for your needs and supports. Remember to always vote. Our voice matters. Now here is Tanya to start the questions. Tanya?
Thank you. Thank you so much. As mentioned, we will be hearing introductions from candidates throughout the evening, recognizing that's a bit different and unique. But since we are going to be hearing responses from some candidates before they introduce themselves. While our time frame unfortunately won't allow us to take additional audience questions for this event, we will still welcome everyone to post their questions or comments on DD priorities and issues in the chat box. We will send that transcript along to the candidates after the event. I am now going to individually ask the gubernatorial candidates in alphabetical order to introduce themselves, and then we will move to the first question for those candidates. Please keep your introductory remarks to 2 minutes. First, will you please share with us Princess Blanding?
Good evening, and thank you again for having me. Again, my name is Princess Blandon, candidate for governor, and I would like to thank the ARC of Virginia for hosting and inviting me to be a part of this amazing event. To our community members with developmental disabilities, I say to you, as I heard earlier, your lives matter and your voices and concerns will be heard and addressed. Gabrielle Adea, my campaign district representative in Hampton Roads, when she passed away last year, was a disability rights advocate, living with her own disabilities. And she taught me exactly how important it is to ensure that no legislation is passed about you without you. As a public school administrator, I have had the immense privilege of leading our special education department, where I worked alongside students and their families to ensure the services worked to address their holistic needs. From my 13 years of being a public educator, I know firsthand the importance of making sure that people with disabilities are fully included in the classroom and further in the community. My grassroots campaign is community-based and community-driven. People in our community with disabilities are some of the most at risk for being killed by the police, largely due to miscommunication and communication differences. The issue is intersectional and increases if the person has a disability and is Black, brown, poor, or facing housing insecurities. I have fought tirelessly for the Marcus Alert, named after my brother, which sends trained mental health professionals instead of police in the event of mental health crises or wellness checks. As your governor, I will fully fund a statewide Marcus Alert system and fully fund and invest in all services and healthcare systems benefiting our neighbors with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We should judge ourselves on the quality of life our most vulnerable population has and guarantee the health, safety of all Virginians with disabilities, and not just simply lay the groundwork for fulfilling any comfortable lives for ourselves, but ensure that we extend that to all of our community members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you here tonight. Next will be former Governor Terry Mcauliffe, the Democratic candidate. Welcome, and please introduce yourself.
You're muted, sir.
Muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think you couldn't. There we go. Don't worry. We will start counting time again. See if that's, I can send a prompt. Oh. No, not quite yet. It's getting there.
How about now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, great.
Well, great to see everybody. A little technology here. Thank you all for being with me today. It's great. Thank all the candidates running for statewide. It's a great honor to be with all the candidates here who are going to lay out their plans of what we need to do. And I see so many friends from the disability community all across. Thank you, thank you, thank you for what you've done, and continually your voices have been heard. We've now seen with COVID how tough things have really been. I think we've really seen some of the inequities that we have in our system today, and we need to fix those. My goal as governor, as I did before, was to make sure that every individual, every single person in Virginia has the same opportunities at housing, let it be healthcare, let it be education. Everybody deserves to have those opportunities. You know, we just celebrated the 31st anniversary of the Disability Act, which was the ADA, which is spectacular. I want to thank Senator Tom Harkin and Congressman Tony Coelho for the great work that they have done to push that forward. But we have about 1.6 million Virginians today with disabilities. Our goal, my goal, and I think everyone's goal, is to make sure that they all have the same opportunities as everybody else in Virginia. We got to make sure that no matter the dependent on one's ability, they have those same opportunities. The good news, unlike when I was governor last time, we have great news. We finally got Medicaid expansion done, something, as you know, I fought for 4 years. Unfortunately, the Republican legislature for 7 years forfeited $2.2 billion a year. Now we have this money running through. Now we can do more work on the Medicaid and the DD waivers. We now have 537,000 Virginians today now have access to health care that did not have it 8 years ago. And I want to thank all of the folks who worked hard to make sure we get that done. I leaned in before as governor, as you know, leaned in hard on these issues. One of my first executive orders, actually number 46, was to make sure at the executive branch that we did executive branch training so that any individual, so that people with disabilities would have the opportunity to come work in our state executive workforce. Huge opportunities. I was very proud. We were the first in the nation to do our program with CVS, job training, so that young adults could get the skills they need and go work at the CVSs all over Virginia, which then became a national model. One of my greatest moments as governor for me was when I signed the ABLE Act. As you know, we were the first state in the United States of America to get the ABLE Act passed, which gives us special tax exempt accounts can be set up now for any individual and family members with those that may have disabilities. It was a really important thing for us to do. I continually leaned in and invested, as you know, in permanent supportive housing. In fact, the other day I was at Scarlet Haven Residential, just a spectacular facility. People want to be able to be in their own residential facilities that gives them the quality of life that they deserve. So as governor, I invested a lot in our permanent supportive housing. I'll do it again. I'll continue to work to get the waivers that we need. I'll work with President Biden. As you know, he has just, through the new American Rescue Plan, great news is he's increased the match by 10% at the federal level, which will allow us to do more DD waivers here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Great news, as you know, I put $110 million in my budget to help those with severe disabilities. When I was governor in 2016, had a big fight, got it done. And I put another $110 million in my outgoing budget to help those with mental health. So I did an executive order number 32 on supportive housing, affordable housing for everybody with disabilities. So I leaned in, but I'll say finally, my greatest moment as governor is when I signed Connor's law, and I see you there, Connor, and you gave me the Mickey Mouse ears to wear, and I thank you for that. And Sharon, I thank you for your advocacy. We became a model for the country with Connor's law, and it was the right thing to do to have child support for those over 18. So thank you, Connor. Thank you, Sharon. I still have my Mickey Mouse ears. But listen, we're in a better place today with all of the federal money, American Rescue Plan, and with Medicaid expansion now in Virginia. We have an opportunity to get everybody in permanent supportive housing and to finally eliminate the waivers that we have here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So thank you. Great working with you, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're pleased to have you here tonight. And next, Glenn Yonkin, the Republican candidate. Welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Well, great. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you this evening. And I'd also like to say hi to Connor and Sharon. It was great to meet both of you last night. And I just so appreciate your leadership. And again, what the work that ARC of Virginia does on behalf of so many is critically important. And so thank you for having me. I actually want every child in Virginia, and particularly children that have developmental disabilities, to have the opportunity to live a full and abundant life. I mean, the goal here is to have an independent, self-sufficient life to the greatest degree possible. And that's why we have to put politics aside, because we have a continuing crisis. And yes, progress has been made, and I do appreciate all the work that has been done. But we still have real challenges. I mean, Virginia is ranked 37th in the country on waitlist percentages, and we're ranked 39th for providing integrated, high-quality developmental disability services. We have a DOJ settlement that we haven't complied with, and we had a really tough JLARC study that came out last week. And this is why I think we, again, put politics down and we all work together in order to move forward and actually get Virginia to the top of the list on these issues, as opposed to having us at the bottom. And that's why I think we need to, in fact, make sure that first, we don't add to the burden on parents and families by having a risk of our schools being closed or our economy being closed. Let's keep everything open. We need to improve customer service. And yes, let's just be real here, that parents and families are customers, and we need to be reactive to their needs much more consistently. I'll work with the new commissioner of the DBHDS to make sure that we actually have a czar. We actually have a point person who will work with all the CSBs to make sure that we're delivering all that we can in order to make sure that everyone who needs services, who wants a waiver, in fact, understands how to get one. We have to transform our system. This isn't a moment for incremental change. It's a moment for transformational change. And we have to be much more transparent. We have to be innovative. We've got to learn the way to be much more effective to make sure that we have the best off-ramp for education and to job training to residential care. As part of this, every single CSB needs to report on their key metrics. It's one of the reasons why we haven't complied with our DOJ agreement. We need to make sure that each CSB reports on their metrics, and so we can understand which one of the 34 groups of them are doing well and which ones aren't, and we can actually move to actually address those issues. And yes, we need to increase funding. We need to seriously increase funding. And I agree with what Princess Blanding had to say about the Marcus Alert. We have to fully fund that. And we have to make a huge effort to get these waiting lists down. It's unbelievable to me that families are waiting as long as they are. I spoke to 2 families this week. Gosh, one family had waited 25 years for their waiver. Another family waited 10 years for their waiver. And as Terry Mcauliffe said, 1.6 million Virginians live with disabilities. They're not defined by their disability. And so we need to all work together. We need to all come together and recognize that it's our humanity that actually brings us together to solve these problems. And we have an enormous problem to go solve. So I look forward to working with all of you. I look forward to working with you like I've worked with the team at Jill's house in order to create respite for families for summer weekends. I look forward to working with you like we've worked with the Virginia Ready Initiative in order to help actually match opportunities and careers to people who've lost their jobs. And I look forward to bringing fresh solutions to this problem, which is absolutely a crisis for Virginia right now, and we have to move forward. So again, thank you for having me, and I look forward to the discussion tonight.
Thank you very much. We're pleased to have you here tonight. Now we will have the gubernatorial candidates answer their first question. After reading the question, I will then call on candidates to respond. We have asked the candidates to keep their responses to 3 minutes each for this question, please. Virginia has a waiting list of more than 13,000 people, 3,000 of whom are in urgent need for Medicaid DD waivers. These waivers fund home and community services that help people with developmental disabilities to live life fully included in their community. The 2021 General Assembly commissioned a work group that is developing recommendations to tackle the waiting list. Additionally, there's currently an increase in the federal match, Medicaid match for these services that was effective April 2021. How would your administration use these recommendations and this opportunity to disrupt Virginia's constant cycle of triage and instead focus on ensuring a thriving community-based DD system? Princess Blanding, please share your response.
Thank you. I think we all know, as it is true with many things, that much of our problems boil down to funding. And I am in full support of the ARC of Virginia's core policy platform in ending the harmful DD waiver waiting list by fully funding it. We must support and fully invest in our DD system without disrupting the services to those who are already being served. And we must increase our waiver reimbursement rate to address the existing workforce crisis in DD services. As an advocate, activist, and your future governor, I believe wholeheartedly in supporting the work and research of groups and organizations that are already doing the work. We must build our communities up from within and fully fund the services and programs needed to ensure that our community care and safety is put first and foremost. I understand that it is very easy to state the obvious, that we must fund our community-based developmental disability system. The big question is how and where do we find the funding? As governor, I will create a wealth tax system and reallocate funds from police departments to systems of care, such as community-based developmental disability systems. When we speak about thriving community-based developmental disability systems, we must also speak about equal rights and protections to our caregivers, who are a key part of our community-based system. The growing cost is largely due to our reactive approach, and it is oftentimes very hard for community members to get the services that they need until they are in crisis. We must take a proactive approach and invest in programs for our community members with developmental disabilities to ensure that proper resources are in place to help decrease the likelihood of them going into crisis, which also requires more funding and can oftentimes result in unjust brutalization or incarceration. We must invest and properly reimburse, supporting, training, and protecting our caregivers, as there is a mass exodus in this field that is leaving our most vulnerable community members without the care and services that they need for survival. Fully funding a community-based developmental disability system and holding strong lines for statewide accountability must no longer be taken in pieces. We must no longer drag our feet and address this, rather address this from a very emergent standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you. And I should have mentioned earlier, we have gotten a little behind because of our technical issues. So I will try to raise my hand perhaps when there's 30 seconds left for future questions, since we got a little behind. Now, former Governor Mcauliffe, would you please answer?
Thank you, Tanya. And what we need to do, obviously, we have to wait for the report to be done, and we'll see the recommendations that they come out from their work group, and we'll move from there. The goal would be to fund, to move everybody through, to get everybody the waivers that we need. As you know, this program is run with the federal government. It's a partial match with the federal government, run through our Medicaid program. And as I say, what we can do is we need to fully fund at our level, but we also need to continue, and we need to work the White House to make sure this new enhanced 10% match, which is part of the American Rescue Plan, let's try and make sure that that's permanent. That will help us tremendously. I mean, the good news, as I say in Virginia, is we finally got Medicaid expansion done, which will run about $2.5 billion through the Virginia economy. It's unfortunate that for 7 years we denied it. But now that money is coming through with over 500,000 people now, so we're able to reallocate resources that would have gone elsewhere that we're paying for mental health, opiate crisis. We now get a lot of that through the Medicaid expansion, which helps us tremendously. And we need to use the savings that we have from Medicaid expansion. We need to use these for the DD waiver slots here. But in addition, we have to work the White House to make sure that make this permanent on the 10% enhanced match that they're doing. And we got to continue to work Washington to try and get more money, obviously, for our waivers. But we here in Virginia, we need to do our part. I'm excited about that. As I say, I leaned in every year as governor. I had battles with my Republican legislature. I put, as I say, in 2016, $110 million in. We finally got that done for permanent supportive housing. We now have to have that same emphasis and energy on these DD waivers. So I'm excited, though, with the Medicaid money we now have, with President Biden now in the White House, with the addition of the $12 billion coming to Virginia through the new rescue plan, American Rescue Plan. There are a lot of opportunities for us, Virginia, to finally deal with this really serious injustice that has gone on too long. So I'm really excited about the challenge, and I look forward to working with everybody on this call. Thank you.
Thank you. And Glenn Yonkin, please respond.
Tanya, thank you. And I believe that the issues we're dealing with have been building for a long time. And in fact, it's a problem with a rationed care system. And in fact, my understanding is that, in fact, the giant waiting list that we have today, in fact, is about twice as much as it was 8 or 9 years ago. And you know, that growth in folks that are waiting, absolutely waiting, is actually compounded because we, in fact, are seeing ourselves incur larger expense each time we wait, And so we first actually, as the other gubernatorial candidates have said, we need to get moving with funding. And there, in fact, is funding available from Washington now, and we need to take full advantage of it. And we, in fact, need to increase our funding from Virginia. We need to do our part. But I also believe that there is a big moment for us to think transformationally. And there's a moment for us to actually show transformational leadership. This is a system which, unfortunately, has not been working for a long time. And so we, in fact, need to step back and look at meaningful changes in the system. And that's why I do hope that the work that is being undertaken now will, in fact, not result with small changes around the edges, but in fact will give us a moment to step back and see how we fundamentally transform a system that is not working. Money can't solve all problems. And in fact, the inefficiencies of not changing the system, of not reforming, of not transforming, I think, unfortunately mean that the money doesn't get as far as it should otherwise. I also believe there's a great opportunity for us to stand up for many of the laws, particularly one that was passed last year, which was in fact a law that would force insurance companies to in fact cover children with autism. And in fact, we've seen insurance companies drag their feet. We've seen them drag their feet. And as governor, I will hold them accountable and make sure that they live by the law that has been passed. I think finally, we see in our own education system, the process of in fact agreeing an IEP takes an extended period of time. And we need to absolutely get focused on bringing that time frame down so that in fact, so many Virginians that in fact want to move forward with their lives with the kind of support they need to have the full lives that we all aspire to have can actually get going. As I said earlier, stories of families waiting 25 years for a waiver, stories of families waiting 10 years for a waiver, only put so much pressure on families on all dimensions. And we have to go to work together in order to relieve that pressure and open up opportunity. And I think as governor, we'll be able to work together to accomplish some really, really important things.
Thank you all for your responses. Thank you. We're now going to transition to a question intended for all candidates. Again, this is a bit unique and different format, and we will continue to have candidates introduce themselves throughout the program. We have asked the candidates to keep their responses to 2 minutes each for this question. Virginia's lack of a robust community-based system resulted in a settlement agreement with the DOJ, the Department of Justice, in 2012. This agreement was scheduled to end June 30th, 2021. However, due to continued non-compliance, the judge has extended the agreement through June 30th, 2022. What do you think needs to be done to not only reach compliance, but to ensure a thriving community-based system is developed and then maintained in Virginia? Delegate Ayala, if you would respond first, please.
Thank you, Tanya. It's also good to see Sharon and Connor. I'm no stranger to fighting for my loved ones to make sure that they have the resources and care they need. When you lack access to healthcare, including mental health care, and a quality education, this impacts your family, not only emotionally and spiritually, but economically. We have in Virginia made progress since 2012, but it's clear we have, a long way to go. We must fully fund our DD wait list, I should say. And I was a proud patron of that budget amendment in 2020. We must also provide funding for additional crisis stabilization centers, which we included in our budget during this past special session. And we must prioritize education to workforce programs so that Virginians with disabilities have meaningful and paid employment opportunities. Access to these programs are just the floor, not the ceiling. And as Lieutenant Governor, I'll continue to advocate for an inclusive Virginia.
Thank you for your response. Princess Blanding.
Thank you. Fully funding person-centered, community-based, long-term support and services is the only way that we are going to ensure people living with intellectual and developmental disabilities are able to live the lives that they want to live in a more equitable Virginia. These services must be reliable, consistent, responsive, and accessible. Most importantly, the services should be developed with people who have disabilities every step of the way and have a focus on the individual receiving the services. Insufficient Medicaid waiver funding is the major barrier for our neighbors who should be receiving these services. But I assure you, Virginia has the money. We rank #1 in business, the 9th wealthiest state, yet our most vulnerable population is denied care and neglected enough to face housing insecurities or incarceration. The continued crisis of unmet needs creates more and more unmet needs, which costs Virginia more money due to institutionalization and incarceration in the long run and ignores the basic human rights of our people at its core. There are continued threats to Medicaid funding from politicians as is, which result in severe hardships and stress to all Virginians. People waiting for community-based service in Virginia is simply unacceptable, and we cannot wait until crisis to address it. Further, we must eliminate the need for families to live in poverty for them to receive services. While there is no reason to wait to fully fund the system, while it develops, priority systems may need to be put in place until we can fully service this system. People with disabilities deserve the medical and financial security to be able to direct their services and define their own quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Delegate Jason Mayorkas.
Well, I'd like to thank you all so much for having me, and it is the autism community and my friends there. I've worked both as a legislature over the years, had the pleasure of addressing several times the Tidewater Autism Summit. I worked hand in hand with my good friend Mark LaBelle, the Virginia Autism Foundation, and seen so many substantive legislation. I think if you have a child with both learning challenges and developmental disabilities, which is very personal for me, my youngest daughter was diagnosed with a mild form of apraxia and then has dyslexia as well. And so I have had to go through the gambit in a different world, but going through the difficulties of both IEPs. But I know one thing, the earlier that you can have intervention, the more productive and the greater payoff down the road. And what we've seen time and time again in Virginia is, quite frankly, the system's failing the most vulnerable. It's unconscionable that right now we're 39th in the country, 39th on disability services. And that should tell you that the system, quite frankly, is broken and it's not helping the very people that it is supposed to need. And the earlier intervention that we could do, and one of the most frustrating things that ever can happen as a parent, is to know that your loved one and your child is in desperate need of services and they can't get them. And when that happens, that means that it's that much more of a delayed intervention. And that means that at the end of the day, it's going to be that much more as well. And I am proud, before it ever became law, I was an early co-patron of the law in Virginia that would require insurance companies to cover reimbursement for autism services. And we know we fought it hard. It was opposed vigorously by big insurance companies. I was glad to see that get across the finish line and be a co-patron of House Bill 2577. But we have a problem, which is insurance companies today aren't honoring the law that was passed. So we need to make sure that the DOJ settlement, it is unconscionable in my opinion that we're getting a judge having to delay it because Virginia is not in compliance. And I can tell you as Attorney General, I'm going to be the people's lawyer. I'm going to be someone who wants to give a voice to the voiceless. And I'm going to absolutely, if need be, use every power and leverage in the court to make sure that those families are being left behind right now aren't being left behind, because I know from firsthand experience, it's so important that we have early intervention for so many of these children.
Thank you. Former Delegate Winsome Sears, your response?
There it is. Thank you. I unmuted myself. Thank you very much for having me. It's good to be here with you. And I just want to say right off the bat that I see that some of you are thanking us for being here. We have to be here because you must be heard. One of the things I know is the first thing that government must do is not to do harm. And unfortunately, this is happening. I mean, I have to tell you that I have, from the time I started hearing about the problems that you have been facing, I've been angry. I've been angry because something could have been done, and it could have been done a long time ago. I know some of these issues because when I was a homeless shelter director for women and children, I had to use the Community Services Board, and I thought we had gotten better at helping people, but I see for some reason we have not been. And I have to tell you, the first, again, is for us not to do any harm. I know that you have been suffering with low rates. I know that you have been suffering with the caregivers not having time for themselves, and other members in the families have been suffering. And then you had a 2012 settlement showing that, of course, the DOJ settlement showing that Virginia has not been keeping her end of the bargain to those who are most in need. And here it is, it was a 10-year settlement that supposedly things should have been better, and it isn't. And you knew, I am sure, when it first started that it was not going to get there anytime soon. And in fact, now you have Commissioner Land, who is telling you that at the most, or the soonest, whatever she calls it, you can be sure that you will get fully funded and reach the DOJ settlement by December 2023. Folks, that's unacceptable. You should not have to wait any longer. And of course, now we're going to have to wait for the study that's coming from the legislature, which is not going to be until November. So here we go again. You're waiting. So I am saying to you that you need to be funded, and you need to be funded now. The problem that you haven't had the funding is because there is not the will to do it. Others have gotten in the way. Other priorities have come forward, and you've been pushed to the side yet again. And that's why I'm saying I'm angry. How much longer must you wait? From what I understand, you have about 13,000 who are suffering, in need, and you've got 3,000 who are absolute priority. And the funding isn't there. And you have to wait. And behind these numbers are real people. And then also you've got classroom segregation that's happening. You know, I used to be on the State Board of Education as its vice president. And folks, I can tell you, I never heard any of this. Never heard about the classroom segregation that was happening. Why weren't we told? This is why you must continue to fight. You must continue to have your voices heard. You must continue, and don't let up to be seen and not be brushed to the side, because it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil. So I thank you. for having us here, and you can be sure that I will make sure that you get the funding that you need, because it's high time. In fact, it's been past time. How much longer must you wait?
Thank you. Thank you. And Glenn Yonkin, if you'd like to respond, please.
Thank you, Tanya. Well, I think one thing I'd like to start with is that my ticket mates, Jason Miaras and Winsome Sears and I, we're running as a ticket. And so I'm so pleased to hear their responses to this most important question, because we are in absolute agreement. We're in absolute agreement. First and foremost, I'm a business person, not a politician. In the world I come from, when you sign an agreement with the Department of Justice, you actually adhere to it and you comply. And the fact that we are here talking about the fact that we haven't complied in this most important area is unacceptable. It's shocking to me. And as I've looked through what it will take to comply, we just have to get done. The second part of the discussion is the fact that we have to in fact press forward with transparency in a system where in fact our community service boards are reporting, and this is the part of the agreement that we're not complying with, at least part of it, are reporting how they're doing with metrics that we can understand. So there's transparency. And how in the world can we make sure that the services are being delivered as we expect them to be delivered if we do not actually comply and ask the community service boards to report how they're doing? So big steps for me are, we're going to comply. We're going to comply with our DOJ agreement. We in fact are going to ask for transparency with our community service boards. And we in fact, as my colleagues have said, are going to fund the resources necessary in order to make sure that we close these terrible gaps. I mean, I still am just shocked that we're sitting here as Virginia, ranked 39th in providing integrated, high quality developmental disability services, full stop. And that is just so unacceptable. So when we get to go work together, we're going to make sure that we're not standing here in 4 years' time, looking back and saying, what could we have done? Because I actually believe that this is a time for action, not words. And it's a time for us to go to work to make sure that we fulfill the obligations that we have, to make sure that we have a high functioning, top tier, leading capability in Virginia to support all of our families.
Thank you. As a reminder to our attendees to use the chat box to submit any questions, your own questions or comments for all the candidates to review later. We also posted their websites for each candidate so that you can learn more about their campaigns. Next is our questions, our second question specifically for the gubernatorial candidates. We have asked the candidates to keep their response to 3 minutes each. The developmental disability system was in a workforce crisis long before the pandemic. COVID has now shown the weaknesses of a system that has been underfunded for far too long. We now have a care crisis because of the workforce crisis that already existed, resulting in people losing their homes, adults going without staff to provide care for basic needs, provider businesses closing, and parents giving up employment due to lack of care for their dependents. As governor, how would you tackle this crisis and bring relief to a struggling community-based system? Candidate Blanding, if you can go first.
Thank you. So, our system is unjust on so many levels, and the only way to solve this is to stop kicking the can and leaning on reports to tell us what we already know. We are at a crisis point when it comes to caregivers in Virginia, and we must properly address and fund our community-based systems immediately. As governor, I will seek out experts, allies, and advocates like ARC of Virginia to help fix this. We have the solutions: increase waiver distribution rates to direct support professionals and make sure that they are earning a livable wage. The issue is making it a priority in the state budget, making sure that our legislators understand that this is non-negotiable. We are facing a crisis as the caregiver shortage is rapidly increasing, as the risk and physical wear and tear on our providers, coupled with lack of benefits, equitable compensation and benefits, is driving our care workers out of the profession. In addition to fully funding our community-based systems, we must provide resources and support to caregivers to include family caregivers, such as ensuring access to employment benefits and protection. Our campaign will continue to push for 4 weeks of family caregiver leave, job protection, and continue to fight for employment protection for our domestic workers who are oftentimes our first line caregivers. Families are falling apart and losing their sense of security as they face the unthinkable choices, such as, do I continue to work and be a provider for my family, or stay at home and be the caregiver for their loved ones in need? Our most vulnerable community members are those that are impacted first by our negligence, in playing political games. As governor, I will always put the voices, needs, and concerns of the people over politics and profit. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Yonkin, your thoughts?
Great. So thank you again. Let's just start, please. We must first acknowledge just the devastation that families are going through who have been waiting for years to receive a waiver, only then to discover that they're unable to obtain the services on that waiver because of shortages in the workforce, or they're unable to participate because schools or businesses aren't open. And so our first step here is to make sure that Virginia stays open. And we will innovate to empower parents to increase the supply of direct support professionals. But we have to stay open so that all the services are available. Nationwide, there is an extremely high turnover for direct support professionals, with nearly half leaving the field within a year. And we all know the devastation of a relationship that has been built that abruptly must change. And continuity in those relationships is so important. So we first must, in fact, increase the supply of people coming into this sector. And we have to increase, yes, compensation and wages. We actually have to increase the path to the sector as well. And we need to make sure that this path for DSP training and development is clearly understood so that we can increase the overall number of people in the field and available. We actually spent far below the national average between 2012 and 2016 on home and community-based support. That's why where we are. And if we in fact increase compensation for primary caregivers at home and actually increase the number of direct support professionals, we in fact can help people stay in their homes as well. As we discussed earlier, we have this report coming. And I think that creating a much deeper pipeline, a pathway for there to be substantial increase in the numbers of professionals who can provide direct support is critical. We're seeing this across the entire healthcare industry. And we know we have to make transformational changes in building workforce pipelines. We know we have to increase compensation. And we know that the future of care depends on this. It depends on this. So therefore, I want you to know that we're going to fund these priorities. The previous administrations, sadly, have left us with a crisis right now. And we know it's a crisis. We've seen it, we hear it, we've talked about it. And so it's time to go to work. It's time to recognize the priority that we have in front of us. And I have the great privilege of going to work for all of you as your governor. And that's the way I view this, as me going to work for you we're going to go to work and make sure that we not only fund our waivers and we fund them fairly, but we increase the pipeline of professionals in order to provide these most needed services. So thank you.
Thank you. It's time to hear more formal introductions from our candidates for Lieutenant Governor, Delegate Ayala and former Delegate Sears. I will call on you individually, and then we're going to move into their dedicated question. Please keep your remarks to 2 minutes each. First, Delegate Ayala, the Democratic candidate on the ballot.
Thank you, Tanya. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me today. My name is Delegate Hala Ayala. I represent Virginia's 51st District in Prince William County and proudly running to be the next Lieutenant Governor of this Commonwealth. Some of you may know my story. Growing up, my family struggled to make ends meet. I lost my father early on to gun violence. I know what it's like to live without a safety net, not knowing where your next meal is going to come from or how you're going to keep your lights on or a roof over your head. You know, as a proud mom of a son with a disability, I ended up running for PTO president because I wanted to make sure that our teachers and students had the resources they needed to succeed. Specifically, I was focused on special ed because of my son. As a leader in the House, I've worked with the ARC and other disability advocates to fight tirelessly and promote equity for Virginians with disability. As the delegate, I proudly sponsored the budget amendment to fund our Medicaid waiver list. This continues to be a priority for me. I supported legislation to strengthen vocational opportunities for students with disabilities. I'm proud of the work that we've done in the General Assembly. Since we've had the Democratic majority, we've just been able to uplift every Virginian, especially our brothers and sisters with disabilities. And as Lieutenant Governor, you can trust that I'll continue to build on the progress we've made together. It's an honor to be in this fight alongside of you all. I thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Former Delegate Sears, the Republican candidate on the ballot.
Yes, thank you for having me again. And as I said, it's an honor to be here. And Connor, it was good to meet you last night, and Sharon as well. Very good to have met you. My name is Winsome Sears. I'm running to be your next Lieutenant Governor of our great Commonwealth of Virginia. You know, America gave my father a second chance at life because you allowed him to emigrate to this country. He only had $1.75 when he came, and then he put himself through school by finding any job he could. And then now he's successfully retired. But before all that, he came and got me 5 years after he came to America. And so I had my own second chance at life. And that's what I'm hoping that I can offer to you. Now, you might say, well, every politician says these things. How do you know that you can trust what Winsome says? Well, because, you know, I have been a homeless shelter director for women and children, and I've seen what happens when you can bring hope into someone's life, when you care. And I did that for 2 years, and I was the one who brought the message of hope again every Wednesday at 6. But then again, I'm not sure that you can hear me. It says something is wrong with my internet.
We do.
Also, you know, I have not been in this position where I am today. You're looking at someone who has been a single mother. So I know what that's like to try to make ends meet on my own. You're looking at someone who had to declare bankruptcy when I had a Marine Corps injury that so I understand what it means to be on the bottom. And as I said, thank God that I am here today. But listen, you must know I will be an advocate for you because I understand what it is for people to not care. I see that we're not paying
I'm sorry. We lost you and time is up.
Education system is failing you. We know because we have seen the studies where it's
Mhm. All right, delegate, former delegate. I'm actually going to just move on. I'm not sure if you can still hear me, but we did lose you and time was up. So we'll just go ahead. We have a dedicated question for these candidates for Lieutenant Governor. After reading the question, I will then call on you individually to respond. We've asked you to keep your response to 3 minutes for this question. The self-advocacy movement has made it clear that the system benefits the most when it is led by people who have lived experience in the system. Often elected officials and leaders do not listen effectively to people when crafting or voting on policies related to the DD system. How would you include people excuse me, how would you include people with developmental disabilities in the decision-making process and support their voices when working on policy with other administration officials? And we'll start with you, Delegate Ayala.
Thank you. So many of my personal experiences inform my advocacy and policy, as do the voters I've heard from across this Commonwealth. I began my advocacy with the PTO because I wanted to fight for students, especially students with disabilities like my sons. I know how hard it was to ensure that he was receiving a world-class education and the resources that he deserved. So I worked with parents who faced the same problems in the school system, and we advocated collectively together for our students, specifically here in Prince William. When I got to the General Assembly, I brought that advocacy with me. I introduced budget amendments to increase the funding for ID and DD waiver lists during the 2020 session. We expanded Medicaid, we expanded educational opportunities for our students with disabilities. I have and will continue to be an advocate for people with disabilities. And as Lieutenant Governor, I'll continue and make sure that every Virginian has a seat at the table versus being on the menu.
Thank you. And former Delegate Sears, your
yes,
3.
my internet has stabilized so that you can hear me properly, but I'm not sure that I heard the question. I think I'm going in and out again. Forgive me.
No, this happens. I certainly understand, as you saw from the beginning. Technology happens. So let me repeat the question.
Yes.
And sometimes it's helpful to turn the video off. I know that's not optimal, but that might help your signal a little bit. But the question again is, the self-advocacy movement has made it clear that the system benefits the most when it is led by people who have lived experience in the system. Often elected officials and leaders do not listen effectively to individuals when crafting or voting on policies related to the DD system. How would you include people with developmental disabilities in the decision-making process and support their voices when working on policy with other administration officials?
So what I have always done whenever I have been in any leadership position was always ask myself, who is not here and what would they want us to know? And by the way, what questions would they want us to ask of the people who are in front of us, who are delivering the reports, etc. And so I would make sure, because I did this when I was on the State Board of Education, I would sit in the role of a parent. What would a parent ask this teacher standing in front of me? What would the parent ask this principal, the school board member? And so I never minced words because I'm acting in the role as a parent. The other thing that I know is my grandmother always said, it is he who wears the tight shoe who feels the pinch. And so I would want to hear from the people who we say we are wanting to help, how best to help them. Who else knows what they are going through except the people who are going through it? So why would I try to find some other means to help when it may not be the best means. It will miss the mark. And in fact, from what I understand, Arizona has one of the best practices when it comes to helping the autism and other communities, especially in the areas of employment, housing, etc. But Virginia has decided to go her own way and forge a different path, which even takes us further away from the DOJ settlement, which is probably one more reason why we are not where we should have been. And by the way, coming back to the DOJ, what were the metrics placed in there so that we would know that we are keeping a timeline of making sure by the 10th year we would reach the agreement? It is unacceptable that we are not there. It is unacceptable that we have our Commissioner Land telling us that we need to wait another 3-4 years to help. It is absolutely unacceptable. And the fact that these folks are still in their jobs is unacceptable. There is no accountability, as far as I can tell. There is no responsibility. Everybody gets to stay where they are, but you continue to suffer. And by the way, I understand that there is a JLARC study from last year that has corroborated everything that you have been saying in your community all this time. That in fact, the DOJ settlement is not going to reach the strategies that was set forth, and that in fact, you are already on the way to still continue to suffer. Caregivers are burning out, the nursing situation, the payment, the employment is not there, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody cares. But I can tell you, when I am Lieutenant Governor, things are going to change. Glenn Yonkin and I, we're going to change it. Jason Myers is going to enforce it. We are going to change things for the better. It is time for that to happen.
Thank you. We're going to take up our second question that's for all of the candidates. Once again, we've asked them to keep their responses to 2 minutes each for this question. In 2020, JLARC released a report on special education in Virginia that identified significant failings, including IEPs that are not consistently designed to be effective, an applied studies diploma for students with disabilities that does not help students access opportunities after high school. Black students with disabilities were less likely to graduate than students with disabilities of other races in each of the last 10 years. And VDOE's handling of complaints against school divisions does not ensure that issues are resolved. VDOE has limited knowledge of whether students with disabilities are being meaningfully included in their local schools, and continues to primarily only provide additional state funding through CSA to students who are placed in private day schools. How do you think Virginia can better support students to have a robust quality education where they are included in their neighborhood schools alongside their siblings, their friends, and their neighbors? Starting with Delegate Ayala.
Thank you, Tanya. Just absorbing the entire question in context. My son was distraught when heading into school, feeling like he was not being heard. As a parent, I was at a loss. I could see that his IEP did not meet the reality of his situation, but I felt helpless because I couldn't advocate for him. No student or parent should ever have the experience of that feeling of helplessness. That is why I'm fighting for all students, parents, and teachers. Every Virginia student deserves access to an equitable world-class resources to support a world-class education. And as delegate, I've worked closely with our disability community, supported legislation so that all of our students could thrive in their educational environments. We've lowered our student to counselor ratio. We've raised teacher pay because I know the need or what we need to do to pay our educators exactly what they're worth. We're funding education at historic rates. And I'm glad all candidates agree, because for 2 decades, we were not funding our school systems. And we're funding them now at historic rates, and we're not done yet. As Lieutenant Governor, I will fully invest in public school education because this is a matter of equity for our teachers and our students. And when you bring these voices and lived experiences and policies into a space that will impact the lives of every Virginian family, student, and the teachers, everybody wins. And so I will be a fighter and champion with you and for you.
Thank you for your response. Princess Blanding.
Thank you. As a veteran educator, a former school administrator, and mother of a child who receives special education services, I know and understand firsthand the struggles connected to navigating our special education system. While I was the assistant principal of an elementary school, we had a student who was experiencing behavioral challenges that were not at that time understood by the family nor the school. The school suspended her. The school considered placing her in a private school for children with autism. I was pregnant with my youngest daughter, Leah, when I received the continuous calls from her teacher to come assist this crying, fleeing child. And, I would do what came to me naturally. I would get down on her level and give her the biggest hug, which immediately helped to calm her down. And what we later learned was that a weighted vest simulated my hug. And through dedication and understanding, we were able to, create a more equitable learning environment in her homeschool through providing safe sensory experiences. Equity in our classroom means that every student is able to succeed, regardless of their abilities, and other individual factors. The vest was equity. It removed a barrier to that student's success. Equity may also look like being flexible in how we assess students' understanding and tailoring the educational methods through which we test our students. And we do this through their IEP, not expecting them, particularly our neurodivergent students, to conform to our methods. Part of this is listening to our community members with autism. And when they tell us that applied behavioral analysis is traumatic to them, we must believe them and provide alternative methods that work for them individually. Further, the sibling, friends, and neighbors mentioned in the question must be a part of the needed societal shift to embrace our differences and learn that the way someone with a developmental disability moves, acts, or thinks is not fundamentally wrong. Our educational system needs to be as diverse as our student body. As governor, I will use my experience as a lifelong educator to approach our students holistically statewide and move away from the one-size-fits-all model. Virginia, we know better, and now we must do better to ensure that our students with disabilities have a robust, quality education right in their home school alongside their peers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Delegate Mayorkas.
Yeah, it is clear if you look at the JLARC study, Virginia has failed the most vulnerable. If you look at the judge overseeing the Department of Justice settlement agreement, they've agreed Virginia has failed. And anybody who's dealt with the education system right now with a child with special needs, they can tell you almost to a person, it has failed them as well. I have sat through countless meetings identifying the fact that my precious Sophia needed individual help, needed an IEP. Those meetings were long, they were taxing, and it's so often the case, it's too slow. And anybody that has dealt with this knows the earlier the intervention, the better the results. It's too long. We have to streamline the IEP process because right now it is failing so many children, they're being left behind. And what's even worse, what's even compounding that is the last year we had our school closures, which at a time we're having a great debate on equality in our country. The reality is wealthy families can afford private tutors and private education, and private schools were able to remain open, but our public schools were closed. And we were told children, including children with developmental disabilities, somehow sitting in front of a computer screen for 8 hours a day was somehow a quality education. Well, any parent will tell you that is not the case, particularly for somebody that has learning challenges. And so we have failed our kids in Virginia. Everybody knows it. IEP needs to be streamlined. As a dear friend of mine in the autism community has said, listen, don't focus on what I can't do. Focus on what I can do. And it's so important that all kids have the opportunity to earn a quality education alongside their siblings, alongside their friends, alongside their neighbors. Excluding kids can lead to negative stigmatism that affects the child for the rest of their life. And so integrating students with disabilities with all school children ought to be the goal when possible. And if it's not possible, it's important to offer those educational services within the school district so that parents can be rest assured their child is receiving the education they deserve. And what's further happened is the standard diploma versus the applied diploma. You have individuals right now that are being told now that their child is a senior, that some of Virginia's community colleges aren't accepting their applied studies diploma. And we have to make sure that's standardized so every child has that second chance, because the goal of a parent is that for their child is able to live an independent, self-sufficient life after they're gone. That is the goal of so many parents. And that'd be my goal as Attorney General, is to force the law and enforce the DOJ agreement.
Thank you for your response. Former Delegate Sears.
I'm just going to cut right to the chase because, you know, we're just going to go round and round with this. And here's what I know. I go as a Marine, I understand authority. So I always want to know what gives me the authority to speak on a certain matter, and then how do we go about it? So I went straight to the state constitution of Virginia. And under Article 8, it says thus, I'm leaving a few of it, bits of it out. The General Assembly shall provide for a system of free public elementary and secondary schools for all children of school age throughout the Commonwealth. And here is the thing, and shall seek to ensure that an educational program of high quality is established and continually maintained. So now that tells me that we are missing the mark. I mean, full stop, end of story. What more is there? It is missing the mark. It has been missing the mark for at least 30 years. And now we have a DOJ that's telling us it is not working. And by the way, the judge wants to ensure that once we meet the requirements, we don't fall out of it, that we continue to maintain. So I would say to you that we must help. We must help. I don't know how best to say we must help. We must ensure that we want to help the children. We're missing the mark. We have to ensure that we integrate our children. We have children I'm hearing now who are in a wing of the classroom, a wing of the school, a wing put away. That's not equal. That's not good. What I understand is a study has shown that if you have the children together in a classroom, everybody flourishes. The education is not equal. And so we have to make sure that we include, we don't segregate. I'm surprised that that's happening. That shouldn't be lawful, but we need to integrate everybody into the school system. It will lift everybody up. The studies have shown that. It doesn't show that any of the children disrupt the school system, disrupt the classes. People get used to the situations that they're in. And it just needs to happen. The Constitution requires it. That's it. End all, be all of story.
Thank you, candidate. And Glenn Yonkin.
Thank you again for tonight. And here we have a situation at the heart of the challenge that Virginians are facing. I mean, let me just start. I want Virginia to be the best place in America to live and work and raise a family for every Virginian, every Virginian. And in order to do that, we absolutely have to make sure that we are offering a quality education, as Winsome has said, to all Virginians. And the opportunity in front of us is to address the woeful performance that has not been corrected. And so here we have a chance with a scorecard, with a DOJ settlement that has been absolutely not complied with a JLARC study that says that our children are not in our high schools, elementary schools, and junior high schools receiving the kinds of support and participation in their IEPs that they should. I mean, in fact, we actually have one of our school districts that's under federal investigation because children with special needs did not get their legally obligated education services this last year. We have so much work to do. Jason mentioned this a minute ago, but we had kids with diplomas who couldn't enter the workforce or continue on to community college. We absolutely need to get moving. I have to say we have had some allies, great work from the Arc of Virginia, but also support from folks in their legislature, particularly one of our Republican colleagues, Senator Donovan, has been doing great work here. But we absolutely have to get moving. We must make every effort to keep our kids in the least restrictive environment. We all know this, but Virginia places 4.6% of students with disabilities in out-of-school placements, a larger proportion than 37 other states, and more than Virginia's goal at 2.5%. I believe the money should follow the student, and we should empower parents by giving them choice and flexibility. This is at the heart of my philosophy with education. The parents have to be empowered. And when you're actually fighting against a system it's not delivering, we actually have to vote for parents. We have to vote for families. And that's where I will put my efforts. Finally, I said this earlier, we need a single person who actually is in charge. As I said, sort of a czar who is accountable, who has the authority to fix problems and can marshal resources to work across our Department of Education, across our CSBs, and empower parents and families to make the best educational choices, the best job training choices, the best choices with regards to long-term living accommodations. We need to get moving. In the world I came from, when people actually aren't fulfilling their responsibilities, they actually lose their jobs. And I think it's time for us to make a change. And I think we need a new path forward. And we need to make sure that we're delivering results, not empty promises, or worse, ignoring a crisis that we have right now. And as governor, and I know Winsome as a lieutenant governor and Jason as attorney general, we are all going to lock arms and go to work to make sure we address these issues.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we're glad to have Delegate Jason Miyares here, the Republican candidate for Attorney General, with us this evening. And we'd like him to introduce himself to the attendees. And then we'd like to talk about our final question to him related to criminal justice. So if you can keep your introductory remarks to 2 minutes, and then we'll go to the question, Delegate.
Thank you. Well, it is such an honor to be here with so many friends. I'm Jason Miyares. I'm a former prosecutor in Virginia Beach. I currently serve in the House of Delegates. I've also had the honor for the last several years of serving on the board of the Chesapeake Bay Academy, which is a special needs school for those children that need those services and have learning challenges. And being on the board of the Chesapeake Bay Academy has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, because I get to interact so many with parents that have noted that this really has given their child a second chance, that so many of them have come to us so frustrated because, quite frankly, our school systems have failed them, and they come to us, quite frankly, desperate. And I think that is so important because, listen, part of my faith is Imago Dei. It's that idea that every child is born in the image of God, and each one of them has a spark of the divine. So how do we unlock that so they can reach their full potential, so they can live to the best of their abilities, independent, self-sufficient lives? But I also think it's important for people to know, where I came from. Really, somebody's beginning in Virginia Beach, begins in Havana, Cuba, when a scared 19-year-old girl got in an airplane, penniless and homeless, and not knowing where her next meal was going to come from. That was my mother, Miriam Yarez, and she fled Cuba in the fall of 1965. And almost 50 years to the day that she left, she was able to go into a voting booth and vote for her son to represent her in the oldest democracy in the Western Hemisphere. That's what I call the American miracle. And part of why I want to run and why I know why Glenn and Winsome are here is we want that American miracle to be available for everybody. And we're running for those quiet heroes that too often never get any recognitions. The quiet heroes at Jill's House or Hope House and so many others that work every day. They get up every day. They give selflessly so much into the parents. They give so much of themselves. Some that have quit their jobs to take care and be the primary caregiver for their family. Those quiet heroes right now feel like so many people failed them. They feel like governments failed them. They feel they're ignored right now. And I can tell you right now, what gets myself up every morning is the idea that I want to be the Attorney General that's going to be that voice for those quiet heroes that feel ignored. And it'd be the biggest honor of my life to be their Attorney General and to provide a voice for the voiceless. And look forward to being with you all some more tonight and answering some more questions.
Thank you. Thank you again for joining us. For our final question, we wanted to ask about an increasingly critical issue. As with previously dedicated questions, we'll ask you to keep your response to 3 minutes. People with disabilities are more likely to be arrested, charged with a crime, and serve longer prison sentences once convicted than those without disabilities. Individuals with IDD, as with other marginalized identities, are even more likely to get caught up in the system. Once entangled, they face unique challenges, bias, and inaccessible services, which only perpetuate the cycle of criminal justice involvement. In your role as Attorney General, what could you do to help protect people with developmental disabilities from unjust involvement in the criminal justice system?
Listen, this is part of the reason why, as delegate, I introduced and patroned House Bill 65 in 2020. That was the Autism Alert Program, and was at the time groundbreaking. We desperately needed a situation. And that is one of the things that for those that have children on the spectrum, if they go missing, if they wander off, that is one of those moments of sheer terror. And that's one of my proudest pieces of legislation was carrying the Autism Alert Program so people can immediately be notified on their device of a child or individual that needs that alert so we can capture them. There's tragically a situation up in DC, actually it was in Maryland, of someone on the spectrum that then tragically drowned in that situation. And so I'm proud to carry that bill. Listen, it's important in every single criminal justice case that you judge it individually. And one thing I'm going to do as Attorney General is I'm going to call balls and strikes. But it's important in every case to fully understand the circumstances surrounding the arrest and the circumstances that may have led to an admission by the accused. As a former prosecutor, I have seen people in court with developmental disabilities that have gone through our court systems. And the court system, quite frankly, hasn't been really set up too often to address their needs. And while I would never condone criminal behavior in any individual, the question is, do they willfully commit a violent crime? Do they have the mental element? It's important for the Commonwealth to always determine first whether the person had a developmental disability, and secondly, what's the proper way to proceed in the criminal justice system? Now that may involve, additional training through the Commonwealth Attorney Services Council on how to deal with someone that's accused of crime with a developmental disability. But listen, all of these type of decisions have to be made on a case-by-case basis, as every developmentally disabled individual is different from the others. And I think that's going to require training. I think it's going to require more services that put forth. But my pledge to you as a prosecutor is I know these are very, very unique cases. And I'm proud of the work that I've done in the General Assembly on that front. My goal is also, they call the Attorney General Virginia's top cop, and we've obviously seen a violent crime explosion that has happened in Virginia. Our murder rate is the highest it's been in over 2 decades. So I think a lot of individuals, a lot of families I talk to right now are, quite frankly, don't feel as safe as they did 8 years ago. And I think it's important to have an attorney general that's going to call balls and strikes, an attorney general that has worked intimately with people in the developmental disability community. And then I think it's also to have somebody that has a big heart and compassion, that understands that these people indeed are made in the images of God and need to be treated with the utmost respect. But everything's going to have to be decided on a case-by-case basis. My hope to be able to bring my judgment to the office and help where I need be. But it would be the biggest honor to be Attorney General for all Virginians from all backgrounds, and that would be my goal. Thank you so much for having me, and see you all on the trail ahead.
Thank you. As part of our closing remarks and before our final thank yous, the ARC of Virginia wanted to quickly share an upcoming initiative that we plan to launch soon, and we urge all candidates before and after Election Day to support. As you can recognize from the questions this evening, people with disabilities need and want the same things that we all do: to be able to live in their own home, to be independent, have choice, and to have opportunity. However, that option isn't widely available because the system is out of balance. And that imbalance is the result of a lack of equity in how we fund services and supports. For instance, currently, there are around 5,400 people with disabilities supported in group homes in Virginia, while less than 250 people are supported in their own homes or apartments through supported living, which is a more independent option for people who want to live in their own place, but need support up to 24 hours a day to do so. That's because providers are reimbursed 33% less to support a person individually than supporting that same person in a multi-person group home. Obviously, a financially unsustainable option for providers. Without providers, there are no options, and we continue to fail people in need. So Virginians need your help. We need your leadership. We need you to commit to championing equity in the way that Virginia funds services and supports. Pledging to help us eliminate the congregate bias and ensure funding that is neutral, respecting individual choice. Ensure that funding for support of a person in a more independent setting is at least equal to funding support for the same individual in a group setting. Otherwise, individualized options won't exist for most. And without options, our system restricts the choice of individuals inappropriately, limiting their independence and opportunity. We look forward to following up with you all on how we can work and must work together to hold our system collectively accountable for equity. It will take a watchful eye from our elected officials and a willingness from Virginia's next administration to truly prioritize a life like yours for everyone. I want to again thank the many partner organizations and individuals who contributed to tonight's event: the ARC of Northern Virginia, Autism Societies of Northern Virginia, Central Virginia and Tidewater, Rev Up Virginia, and the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities Training Alumni Association. A very special thank you to Lucy Beednell, Sharon and Connor Cummings for their time and their assistance tonight. Since the beginning, but particularly over the last 18 months, there's been opportunity for nonstop advocacy, the numerous legislative sessions, providing member support during especially challenging period, and preparing for this state convention. It's meant a lot of collaboration and adjustments, and of course, a learning curve and opportunity to grow. So we want to thank all of our members and our attendees and all of the candidates who have joined us and their staff who do an incredible amount of work to make things happen, for working with us on this forum. The word we've heard so much over the last year or plus has been unprecedented. That's absolutely the case, though. We say it again, unprecedented. And with so much constantly needing attention, we're grateful for everyone's willingness to be involved in these critically important conversations about how we can rescue the DD system from the current and long-running crisis while building and ensuring holistic and adequate support, care, and opportunity for Virginians with disabilities, their families, and their care teams in their homes and communities. The ARC of Virginia, as always, is here available to serve as a partner and a resource to you. And we look forward to earnestly continuing to work ahead into the November elections and beyond. We thank you for your time and attention. We're saving the information in the chats, and we'll share that with all of the candidates. Thank you so much. Good night. Thank you. Thank you.